All right, we're going to talk about emotion and leadership, or maybe a better title would be um, leadership blinded by emotion. Interesting. Well, here's the deal. I just got done running at the gym, hashtag gym brag, and I'm watching. My brother recommended this Netflix movie that just came out called Worth, and it's about the legal process of the, I don't know the exact title, but the uh, September 11th Victim Fund. I forget the exact title, but basically, and I'm just starting, I may be 40 minutes into it, but basically telling the story of the lawyer and law firm who went through the process of figuring out the worth or the compensation that should be given to all the families of victims of the 9/11 attacks. And there's these really interesting leadership scenes in the beginning. One being that I guess the attorney general gives the job to this Michael, what's his name? Beetlejuice, Batman guy. It'll come to me. Michael Keaton. Actor Michael Keaton gets the job as the lawyer to do this, and so they go through and they figure out the numbers, and then he has to stand in front of all the loved ones of the victims of 9/11, or a group of them, and he just begins to go into the mathematics, the numbers, this is why we are doing this, and people are getting upset because they're feeling an overwhelming amount of emotion related to this scenario, right? Where Michael Keaton's character, he's just hey, I just work here. I'm just here to figure out the numbers and then make sure you get due compensation. And people are saying, oh, my, waitress daughter is worth just as much as a CEO, and on and on. So it's a very complex, difficult problem. And Michael Keaton is just like overwhelmed by the emotion coming from this audience, right? And rightly so. I can't imagine the emotion of these individuals who lost so many loved ones, and a lot of them breadwinners and whatnot. And then Michael Keaton says, well, my staff will be available if you ever need to talk to any of us. And then it shows these scenes of attorneys in his law firm sitting down with the loved ones of the victims of 9/11, and they are just telling these stories about the last time they talked to them and how they died. And the attorneys are just like baffled. They just can't even talk. I mean, their jaws are dropped and they're just overwhelmed with the reality of just the brutal nature of this horrible tragedy in the history of our country, and more poignant in the history of these individuals, right? And so it just made my mind reflect on this concept of emotion and how it impacts leaders. And, obviously, this law firm or these attorneys are in some form leaders of this project of figuring out the best compensation. And really, it's an impossible task, right? But so I sort of put them in a leadership position because they have to navigate these waters, right? And it reminds me of the time when I served as bishop. I was in an inner city ward with really high levels of welfare requests. And it could have easily taken every minute of my attention as bishop. So much so that the inner city mission, fantastic program, fantastic mission, sent about 4 different couples. These were couples from the surrounding areas of Salt Lake. They sent me 4 inner city missionary couples specifically to focus on the temporal needs of the ward. And so if somebody requested a welfare request, I would send one of these couples out to do an assessment and understand the situation. And I was very intentional about this, that some people would just say, no, I don't want to talk to the missionaries. I want to talk to the bishop. And some of them even try to set an appointment with me and then come in with all their bills and say, I need you to help me with these, right? Part of my strategy in this process, and I don't claim it was the perfect strategy, but I found it really effective in helping me make really sound decisions with the sacred fast offering funds. And that I would try and separate myself from the emotion of the situation, right? If I had a mother in my office with children who were going to be evicted from their home, I was completely blinded, and probably rightly so, right? But it seems a bit harsh or callous to maybe separate yourself from the emotion. But this is where like leadership positions are just really difficult, because you have to do things that seem callous at times so that you can make the best long-term decision for everybody. Because oftentimes, as I separated myself from the emotion, and my barrier there were these inner city missionaries who would then do an assessment. And really, I recommend any ward do this with, even if they don't have inner city missionaries, but they would call a welfare specialist to help with this process. But they would go do the assessment, and then they'd just bring me the facts. Here's how long they've been there. Here's how much they make. They probably need, they're probably underemployed. They get this much compensation from welfare or whatever, government programs, disability or whatever it is. And then I could look at the numbers, assess the situation, and then make a decision. Now, a lot of times that decision seemed callous. It seemed, man, you won't even pay our rent, Bishop? Like, what's up with that, right? Now, obviously, these are tough decisions, especially as I consider the sacrifice of those ward members, and really ward members across the world who contribute to the fast offering funds. I consider their sacrifice, and I want to make sure I make the best decision with that money, right? And so sometimes I'd say, sorry, we can't help you, or we'll help you for 2 months. After the 2 months, you're going to have to figure out a different plan. And that time would pass, and then a lot of times they would be really mad at me, right? I can't believe you're doing this. Now I have to pack up my family. Like, this is a really difficult step you're pushing us in. Now, more times than not, and I can't automatically think of every situation, but more times than not, these individuals down the road would be in a much better place. They'd be able to afford it. They'd be happier. They wouldn't have as much stress because they had to move out, or they had to quit their job, or whatever it is, and get a new job or find a new place. And in the long term, it was a better decision. And I was able to help with that process with the keys and responsibilities that I held, because I separated myself from the emotion. So going back to this movie of Worth, which you should all check it out, and I'd love your feedback on this, as far as how you'd maybe handle it as a leader. Now, this story being told, this true story in Worth, way above my pay grade. I'd hate to comment too much on it just because it's just completely out of my reach intellectually and leadershiply and so forth. But I'm just considering how Michael Keaton's character and his law firm and attorney, my thinking would be to separate those individuals from as much emotion of the situation as possible, or else they're going to make a worse decision in the long run. And maybe even set up some sort of empathy committee, right? Like a team of lawyers who aren't making necessarily the final decision, but are in place for these individuals to be heard. Because that's a big thing, no matter what decision they made, even if they gave them all the money in the world. If they feel like I wasn't heard and these points weren't taken into account, because the reality is these lives that were lost on that tragic day, you can't put a value to that. At how many million, how many billion, trillion, these are loved ones that had such an impact that they're literally priceless, right? And so it's an impossible decision. And when impossible decisions are in the works, you got to get rid of the emotion to make a sound decision, and it's going to bless the lives and heal more of that trauma that those emotions create, or that emotion is coming from, than getting too buried in the emotion of it. So let me know what you think. Go check out this film. It's real, and I love these. They're doing more of these ones. I just love these historic of modern times, just real life scenarios. It tells the history in a really interesting way. So go check it out and let me know what you think about emotion blinding leadership.